Thomas was 69 when he realized something was wrong, not with his heart, not with his knees, but with something deeper. He lived alone in a quiet part of Ohio. His wife, Elaine, had passed away 5 years earlier. They had been married for 42 years. After her funeral, he packed away more than just her belongings, without consciously deciding to. He also packed away a part of himself. It started subtly, the way many things do when you're grieving. At first, he simply felt that touching himself, being intimate with his own body, was inappropriate now, maybe even selfish. He didn't talk to anyone about it. Who would he talk to at church? It wasn't something you brought up. The men at the local coffee shop talked about yard work and football, not loneliness, not aging, and certainly not intimacy. And his doctor. The doctor only asked about blood pressure and cholesterol. So, Thomas just stopped. No self-pleasure, no exploration, no intimacy, not even casual attention to his own skin or how it felt to be in his body. He convinced himself it was the respectful thing to do, a quiet act of loyalty to his late wife. And perhaps, deep down, he believed that sex in any form had an expiration date somewhere around the age of 60. But over time, something strange began to happen. He didn't just miss his wife's touch. He began to feel disconnected from himself. He stopped sleeping well. His nights became long and restless. He would lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. Some mornings, he would wake up feeling like he hadn't rested at all. Then came the numbness. Not physical numbness, at least not at first, but emotional numbness. He felt less alive, less in tune with himself. He didn't laugh as easily. He avoided looking in the mirror. He stopped noticing the little things, how soft the sheets felt, or how warm the sun was on his back when he walked to the mailbox. Life didn't feel painful. It just felt muted. Eventually, the physical changes followed. His joints were stiffer. His pelvic area felt uncomfortable at times. There was a strange pressure when he sat for too long. His doctor attributed it to aging, maybe prostate swelling, maybe circulation. They did some tests. The results weren't alarming, but they weren't completely normal either. One thing was clear. Something was being neglected, something Thomas hadn't mentioned. It wasn't until a younger urologist asked him a direct question. When was the last time you ejaculated that it hit him? 5 years. Half a decade without touching himself. Half a decade of disconnect. And now, it might be affecting his health. The doctor explained what no one had ever said before. Self-pleasure isn't just about desire or sex. It's about blood flow, about prostate health, about hormone balance, sleep, and stress relief. Even occasional self-touch helps keep tissue elastic, nerves responsive, and the body grounded. Thomas left that appointment more stunned than embarrassed. No one had told him this, not once, not even his doctor of 20 years. He had spent 5 years denying himself one of the most natural, harmless, and beneficial forms of self-care, because he believed it didn't belong in this stage of life. What he didn't realize back then, what most seniors still don't know, is that stopping this kind of connection doesn't just silence desire. It slowly erodes health. It leads to tension, congestion, and emotional dullness. It can weaken your body's signals and steal your peace of mind. And here's the quiet truth. Thomas eventually admitted to himself, it wasn't just about his wife. It wasn't just about shame. It was about feeling as though his body no longer mattered, like it had quietly moved into retirement as well. And no one, not his friends, his family, or his doctors, had ever said otherwise. But now, everything was beginning to change. Because once you understand what's truly at stake, not just your pleasure, but your sleep, your circulation, your confidence, you begin to realize something simple but powerful. Touch isn't optional, it's essential, even when it comes from your own hands. If this story resonates with you or reminds you of someone you care about, let me know by commenting one below. And stay with me, because what happened next in Thomas's journey might just change the way you take care of yourself. Number 1. The body doesn't forget, but it does shut down. The human body is smart. It remembers movement, sensation, and even patterns of care. But here's the part no one tells you: when those patterns stop, when the body no longer receives what it used to, it doesn't just pause, it starts to shut down, just like muscles shrink when you stop using them. Your sexual organs follow the same rule. They don't stay ready out of loyalty. They respond to activity or the lack of it. And when the activity disappears, so does their strength, sensitivity, and even basic function. Thomas learned this the hard way, months after his decision to stop touching himself. He began to notice small changes. His erections were weaker, sometimes painful. The skin in that area felt tighter, less flexible. What used to be a source of comfort had now become a source of confusion and sometimes discomfort. He told himself it was just aging, but deep down, something didn't sit right. It wasn't until his visit with a younger urologist that the truth became clear. The doctor looked at his test results, nodded, and said something Thomas never forgot. If you don't keep the blood flowing down there, your prostate is going to go on strike. And it wasn't a joke. He meant it. Without regular sexual activity, even in the form of self-pleasure, the male pelvic region begins to lose circulation. That reduced blood flow leads to shrinking tissue, stiffer nerves, and less natural lubrication. Over time, that can mean real pain and real complications. The technical terms: pelvic atrophy, prostate congestion, tissue desensitization. But all Thomas knew was that it hurt, and that it hadn't always felt that way. And men aren't alone in this. For women, the silence around this issue is even more profound. Many older women stop self-pleasure or any form of intimate stimulation simply because no one tells them it's still important. Or worse, they're made to feel that it's inappropriate. But biologically, the consequences are serious. Without stimulation, the vaginal walls begin to thin and tighten. The area becomes drier, less elastic. This is called vaginal atrophy, and it can cause burning, itching, even bleeding during movement or urination. Some women start to experience recurrent infections, urinary urgency, or stress incontinence, leaking urine when laughing, coughing, or getting up too fast. And tragically, many of these symptoms are dismissed as just part of getting older, but they're not inevitable. In many cases, they're the result of disuse of a body being left unattended, untouched, unacknowledged. There's a myth that once hormones like estrogen and testosterone drop, the body loses interest in sex altogether. But that's only half true. The mind may quiet, but the body still craves circulation, sensation, and care. It still depends on stimulation to stay functional. Think of it like watering a plant. Stop for a week. It gets dry. Stop for a month. It starts to wilt. Stop for a year. and it dies off completely. The same thing happens inside you slowly, quietly, until one day you realize something vital is gone. When Thomas heard all of this laid out plainly, he felt a strange mix of emotions, embarrassment, anger, regret. No one had warned him, not when he turned 60, not when he lost his wife, not even during regular checkups. He was told to walk for his heart, stretch for his back, eat fiber for digestion, but no one said a word about what happens when you go 5 years without touching your own body. Now he knew, and it changed everything. He started small, once a week, no goals, no pressure. Just a gentle moment of contact, a reminder that this part of him still existed, still needed attention, still had something to give. The first few times were uncomfortable, but after a few weeks, the tension eased. Sensation began to return. His pelvic floor felt more stable. Urination was easier. His body was, in some quiet way, coming back online. He wasn't chasing pleasure. He was restoring function. This isn't about being youthful or chasing some image of sexual vitality. This is about basic health, about preventing unnecessary pain, infection, and decline, about keeping the body you live in working as well as it can, for as long as it can. You wouldn't stop brushing your teeth just because you turned 70. You wouldn't stop washing your hands or stretching your legs. So, why stop touching a part of yourself that depends on attention to stay alive? Your body doesn't forget, but if you ignore it long enough, it will begin to shut down. The good news, it doesn't take much to bring it back. In the next part, we'll explore what happens emotionally when that disconnection goes on too long, and why restoring intimacy with yourself may be the key to staying grounded, joyful, and present in your later years. Number 2, emotional disconnection from skin to soul. Thomas once described it like this: I felt like I was just the shell of someone who used to be alive. That feeling didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, over months and years after he stopped touching himself, after he stopped treating his body like it still mattered. At first, it was subtle, a little less laughter, a little less motivation to leave the house. Then it became something heavier, a dull fog that followed him from morning to night. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't even sad. Exactly. But he didn't feel like himself anymore. He used to shave every other day. Now, it was once a week, maybe less. He stopped wearing his favorite shirts. He avoided mirrors, not because he disliked his reflection, but because, in his words, there was nothing there to recognize. What Thomas didn't realize at the time, and what most older adults are never told, is that sexual self-connection isn't just about physical stimulation. It's a psychological anchor, a way to stay rooted in your own identity. When that connection disappears, the shift isn't just in the body. It reaches the heart, the mind, and the very core of how you see yourself. For Thomas, this showed up as emotional dullness. He stopped initiating conversations. He withdrew from friends, even at family gatherings. He often stayed quiet, off to the side. The joy of being around others faded not because people changed, but because he no longer felt like someone worth engaging with. He once said something that struck me hard. I wasn't lonely because I was alone. I was lonely because I couldn't feel myself anymore. This is a truth many older adults experience but don't name. We talk about loneliness as a lack of people, but sometimes it's a lack of internal connection, of feeling grounded in your own skin, of remembering that your body still belongs to you, Self-intimacy, even in its simplest form, is a private declaration. I am still here. I still deserve to feel. And that message matters more with age, not less. Touch, especially from your own hands, reaffirms presence. It brings warmth, familiarity, and even a quiet sense of power. It reminds you that your life is still yours, that no matter what has changed, you still own your breath, your skin, your sensation. You are not invisible, not to yourself. Many seniors, especially those who live alone, find themselves slowly fading from their own awareness. They go through routines, eating, bathing, watching television, but without joy, without pause, without presence. Life becomes mechanical, but self-touch is different. It interrupts that autopilot. It asks you to slow down, to pay attention, to return to yourself, not as a chore, but as a kind of care. That's why this conversation isn't about sexuality in the way the world defines it. It's not about lust, climax, or fantasy. It's about connection. It's about staying emotionally tethered to the one person you are guaranteed to live with until the very end yourself. Thomas started to notice a shift when he began reconnecting physically. He didn't expect fireworks, but what came was a small, quiet spark of recognition. He looked in the mirror one morning and didn't flinch. He buttoned a nicer shirt and walked to the diner for breakfast. A woman smiled at him. He smiled back. These may seem like small things, but when you felt like a ghost in your own life, even a faint return of self is monumental. This is why ignoring your sexual self isn't harmless. It's not modest. It's a slow erasure. And over time, it can lead to a hollowed-out sense of being where your emotions flatten, your confidence fades, and you begin to shrink inside the world you once moved through with purpose. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Your ability to feel pleasure is not just a function. It's a form of memory, a way your body reminds you that you are alive, that you matter, and that there is still color in the world, even in solitude. And yes, it takes courage to return to yourself after so many years apart. But that courage is what makes the act so powerful. Thomas rediscovered that, and in doing so, he rediscovered himself. If you've ever felt that same distance, that sense of being physically present, but emotionally absent, just know there is a way back. It begins in private, but it echoes into every part of your life. You are not just a body, but your body is still part of your story. Treat it like it matters because it does. If this message speaks to you, type 1 in the comments. If you're still not sure, type 0 and let's talk more. No shame, no pressure, just honesty. That's how we reconnect with truth, with care, and with ourselves. Number 3, what no one really explains: hormones and the power of sleep. Thomas never expected such a simple change to have such a deep effect. Few weeks after he began touching himself again, just once a week, gently, without pressure, he noticed something that surprised him more than anything else. He was sleeping better. For years, he had accepted poor sleep as part of aging. Falling asleep took forever. Staying asleep felt like a gamble. He would wake at 2:30 or 3 hours in the morning restless, staring into the dark. By 6 a.m., he'd rise tired, irritated, and already low on energy before the day had even begun. But something shifted. His body, it seemed, remembered what it had been missing. What Thomas didn't realize, what most people never hear, is that sexual self-touch, even without climax, triggers a powerful hormonal response. It's not just about arousal or pleasure, it's biological maintenance. And it has everything to do with how your brain and body stay in balance. When you engage in self-pleasure, your brain releases a cocktail of natural chemicals, hormones designed to soothe, stabilize, and restore. These include dopamine, oxytocin, prolactin, and endorphins. Let's break that down. Dopamine gives you a sense of motivation and reward. It lifts your mood and fights off emotional dullness. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, creates calmness and emotional warmth even when you're alone. Prolactin promotes deep relaxation and is directly linked to restful sleep. Endorphins ease physical pain and reduce mental tension, making you feel more grounded and less anxious. In Thomas's case, these changes were subtle at first. He started waking up fewer times during the night. The tightness in his chest was gone. He no longer clutched his pillow in frustration. And in the morning, he felt clearer, less foggy. His heart rate was steady. His breath was deeper. His mornings felt lighter. This wasn't magic. It was chemistry. It was nature doing its job, finally given permission. Most seniors don't get this explanation. Doctors might talk about cholesterol, blood sugar, or blood pressure, but rarely about how a lack of physical release can disrupt sleep, upset hormone balance, and worsen emotional health. And yet, the data is there. Studies show that older adults with more consistent sexual activity, solo or partnered, experience lower levels of anxiety, better sleep quality, and even improved memory. Why? Because the hormonal cycle created by that brief act has lasting effects throughout the night and beyond. It doesn't require athletic performance. It doesn't need to be frequent. Even once a week can make a meaningful difference. Just a few private minutes that shift how your brain processes stress, how your heart relaxes, and how your body resets itself overnight. Thomas shared something that sums it up perfectly. I didn't know I could feel this rested again. All I did was reconnect with something I used to do without thinking. But now, I see it for what it really is, a tool to help me sleep, heal, and feel like myself again. This is what makes the conversation about masturbation in older adults so important and so misunderstood. It's not just about pleasure, it's about healing. It's about maintenance. It's about restoring what aging, grief, or silence might have taken away. And no, this isn't about returning to the passion of your 20s. This isn't about chasing youth or chasing thrills. This is about respecting your biology, about honoring the fact that your body still works and it still wants to work with you, not against you. If you've been waking in the early hours with restlessness, or if you find yourself feeling anxious without reason, consider this. Maybe what you're missing isn't more pills, not another doctor's visit, but a simple moment of reconnection with yourself. No one else needs to know. This is your practice, your space, your body. But what matters is that you give yourself permission. Because your sleep matters, your peace of mind matters, and your hormones, those quiet messengers running the show behind the scenes, are ready to help, if you just give them the signal. So tonight, if you find yourself wide awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, take a moment, breathe, and remember, you are not broken. You are not alone. You are just a body waiting to be remembered again. Number 4, the turning point at the clinic. You'll need surgery if you keep ignoring this. It started with something Thomas had ignored for weeks, maybe even months, a little trouble urinating. At first, it was just a slower stream. Then he began waking up 3, sometimes 4 times a night just to use the bathroom. Eventually, he noticed something more worrying: pressure, not pain, exactly, but discomfort, a dull, heavy kind of tension in his lower abdomen that refused to go away. He kept brushing it off. Just getting old, he told himself. Happens to everyone. But when he could no longer sit through a meal without needing to excuse himself, or when he found himself straining just to feel some relief, he finally made the appointment. The doctor was younger than Thomas expected. Calm, direct, no nonsense. After a digital exam, a scan, and a urine flow test, the urologist sat down across from Thomas and said something that cut straight through the denial. You've got a congested prostate. It's not cancer, not yet serious, but if this keeps up, we'll be talking about surgery in a year or less. Thomas blinked. Surgery. The doctor nodded. If the gland stays swollen and inactive, it will eventually block your flow completely. Then we're talking about catheters, possible infection, or a procedure to remove part of the prostate. Then came the words Thomas never thought he'd hear in a medical office. Or, you could start doing what you did when you were 30, at least once a week. Get the blood flowing. Keep things moving. Thomas sat there in silence, unsure whether to be shocked or embarrassed. Are you saying I should masturbate? The doctor didn't flinch. Yes. Not for fun, though that's not illegal, but for function. You need release. You need circulation. Your prostate is a working gland. And if it doesn't work, it swells. Simple biology. This isn't about sex. This is about plumbing. Thomas didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, realizing that no one had ever explained this to him before. Not in his 40s, not in his 50s, not even as his body began changing in his 60s. He'd been told to cut back on salt, on red meat, on alcohol. He'd been told to walk more, stretch more, take his blood pressure pills, but no one had ever told him that stopping sexual activity altogether could contribute to this kind of problem, that his prostate, like every other part of his body, needed regular attention to stay healthy. He walked out of that appointment with a mix of relief and regret. Relief that he didn't need surgery, not yet. Regret that he had waited this long to take his own body seriously. It wasn't about pleasure anymore. It wasn't about fantasy or longing. It was about circulation, glandular health, and avoiding unnecessary medical procedures. And most of all, it was about finally understanding something simple and true. What you stop using, your body stops supporting. Thomas felt a strange kind of clarity that day. This was not sinful. This was not shameful. This was self-maintenance. He thought of all the years he had spent feeling guilty for having natural urges, all the quiet shame he had carried into his later years. And now, here was a doctor, not a friend, not a therapist, but a physician telling him plainly, this is part of your health. Treat it that way. So he did. He didn't rush home. He didn't do it out of panic. He waited until the weekend. He gave himself time. He chose a moment when the house was quiet. He sat with himself, not with fear, not with tension, but with a quiet sort of permission. The first time felt awkward, but not wrong. It felt like opening a long-forgotten drawer and finding something useful you didn't know you still had, something that still worked, something that still mattered. From that point forward, Thomas treated his body differently, not as a problem, not as a relic, but as a partner, as something worth preserving, protecting, and yes, touching. Because no matter how old you are, your body is still listening. And sometimes it's not whispering, it's shouting, "Please, don't forget me." If this story speaks to you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, share this video or comment one below. And if you've ever felt confused, ashamed, or simply uninformed about this part of your health, you are not alone. Stay with us. The next step is learning how to reconnect with your body the right way, gently, safely, and without guilt. Number 5, relearning self-care, a quiet kind of healing. For Thomas, starting over didn't mean chasing some forgotten passion or trying to feel like a younger man again. He wasn't interested in performance. He was interested in presence and feeling something, anything. So he made a decision, a quiet, personal one. He picked a time when the house was still, when distractions were few, usually in the late morning, after coffee, when the sunlight came through the living room just right. He bought a simple, fragrance-free lubricant, the kind that didn't sting or leave a mess. No artificial scents, no tingling additives, nothing flashy, just something to make the experience gentle, comfortable, and kind. And then he sat with himself, not to rush, not to achieve, just to reconnect. The first time, there was no pleasure, at least not in the way most people expect. There was just a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Not pain, not shame, but awkwardness. Like trying to have a conversation in a language he used to speak, but had nearly forgotten. He touched himself slowly, almost clinically, just getting to know the texture of his skin again. It felt foreign, mechanical, like he was exploring someone else's body. He didn't judge it, he just observed. And then he did it again the next week. Still no big emotional breakthrough, still no spark, but he felt less tense. His breathing came easier afterward. That night, he slept a little deeper. By the 3rd or 4th week, something shifted. The sensation returned, not explosive, but warm, real. He noticed small things, how the skin felt softer, more responsive. The discomfort he'd once felt in his lower abdomen started to fade. The pressure was easing, and more than that, his mood lifted. He began shaving more regularly. He started wearing nicer shirts again, even just to sit on the porch. One morning, he passed a mirror and actually stopped to look, not with judgment, not with regret, just curiosity, and he nodded to himself. There you are. What Thomas discovered wasn't sexual reawakening, it was emotional reconnection. He said it best himself. I wasn't looking for excitement, I was looking for myself, and I think I found him right there, in that small act of care. That small act turned into a practice, once a week, no schedule, no pressure. Just a quiet space to be present in his own skin, to feel without explaining, to experience without expectation. And that change didn't stay private. One afternoon, he ran into Carol, his neighbor, a widow too. They had waved politely for years, exchanged the occasional word about the weather or trash day. But this time, Thomas lingered a little longer. He noticed she was reading a book he had loved in his 20s. He said so. They talked. The next week, they had coffee, then lunch. No one made any big declarations, but something had shifted in him. A door had opened, a door that had once been sealed shut by shame, grief, and years of neglect. Thomas didn't credit this new openness to a dating book or therapy or divine intervention. He credited it to self-touch, to relearning how to care for the one body that had carried him through decades of work, loss, family, and change. This act wasn't sexual in the way most people understand the word. It was restorative. It was a form of self-therapy, a way of saying, I still matter, a way of reminding his nervous system, his spirit, and his skin that he had not given up on himself. Too many older adults live in silence. They walk through each day mechanically eating, cleaning, watching television without ever truly feeling present. Thomas's story is a reminder that presence can begin in the smallest moments, with a gentle touch, with a bit of curiosity, with the courage to sit with your own body, not to judge it, not to fix it, but simply to meet it again. And when you meet yourself with kindness, everything else in life begins to soften. The world opens back up. If you're still watching and something about this resonates, leave a 1 below. And if you're still unsure, that's okay. Comment 0 and share your thoughts. This space is here for honesty, not perfection. In the next part, we'll talk about the deeper meaning behind all this. Why learning to touch yourself in later life isn't just physical or emotional, but a way to reclaim something sacred. Because this isn't just about sensation, it's about dignity. And that's where we go next. Number 6. The final word, what is worth holding on to in old age. There is a belief, quiet but persistent, that sexuality fades with age. That desire dies off sometime after retirement. That touch, especially self-touch, becomes irrelevant, or worse, inappropriate. But the truth is much simpler and far more human. Sexuality does not die with age. It evolves. It stops being about urgency and performance. It becomes about connection, memory, care, and presence. What Thomas discovered was not a return to youth, but a return to himself through self-touch. He remembered a part of his being that hadn't vanished, just gone quiet, a part that was still waiting to be noticed. Not out of lust, not out of fantasy, but out of respect. You see, as we age, we let go of a lot of things, and in many ways, we have to. We let go of speed, of certainty, of some routines, relationships, even parts of our physical strength. But not everything must be let go. Some things, like the right to feel, the right to care for your own body, the right to receive pleasure on your own terms, are worth holding on to, maybe now more than ever. Because this is what self-touch becomes in your later years. Not a secret, not a shame, but a declaration, a way of telling your skin, I am still here, a way of telling your spirit, I am still worth touching, worth loving, worth hearing. Thomas said it best once during a quiet moment. I don't touch myself to get excited. I touch myself to remember that this body is still mine, that it didn't become public property or just a list of prescriptions. It's mine, and it still listens when I speak to it with care. And maybe that's the heart of it all. When you spend your life taking care of others, fulfilling roles like parent, spouse, provider, it's easy to forget the person underneath all those hats. Aging strips away a lot of those titles, but what it leaves behind is your truest role to care for yourself, not in isolation, but in truth. And caring for yourself means listening, touching, honoring. It means saying to your own body, in its lines and looseness, its aches and memory, you still belong. You are not done yet. That's not vanity. That's not indulgence. That is dignity. And dignity is not measured in how others treat you. It's measured in how you treat yourself. So no, this is not about chasing youth. It's about aging with your full self intact. It's about knowing that even when relationships shift, even when silence becomes more common than conversation, even when no one else sees you the way they once did, you still see yourself. You still have access to something sacred, the power to feel, to soothe, to reconnect, and you do not need permission. You do not need to explain it. You do not need to tell a soul, but you do need to tell yourself that you are not finished, that you are not invisible, that you still matter. Because the world may be busy forgetting the power of quiet, private rituals. But your body hasn't forgotten, your spirit hasn't forgotten, and you deserve to remember. So here's my simple advice. If you take nothing else from this story, you do not need to tell anyone else, but you do need to start telling yourself again, I am alive. I can still feel. I still have value. And if you can say that in silence, in softness, in stillness, then you've reclaimed something that many lose not because of age, but because of shame. Let that shame go. It never belonged to you in the first place. And if this video reminded you of something important or gave you permission, you didn't know you were waiting for type 1 in the comments. If you're still unsure, type 0. I read them all. I listen because we're in this together. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for choosing to age not just with grace, but with truth. Your journey is not over. Your body is still listening, and it's never too late to come back home to yourself.